He fixed their ship, and the twin alien girls asked if he'd stay forever. Cass Brenner leaned back in his seat, hands cradling a cup of synthetic coffee, staring out at the barren expanse of the Gliese Verge. The stars looked as distant as they always did, points of frozen fire, unreachable, uninterested in his existence. He let out a small sigh and pressed a button on his console, activating the comms link to the vessel awaiting his repair. A dull, static-filled voice crackled back. "Repair request confirmed," the voice said. "Coordinates locked. Proceed to dock, Engineer Brenner. Our systems are currently not functional. Please arrive soon. Time is of the essence." Cass muttered to himself as he set the coffee down. Time of the essence, huh? They always say that, and always with that dramatic tone, like I'm some kind of cosmic savior. The coordinates were straightforward. An old model, the Alderaan, just another one of those ships that had outlived its prime by decades but refused to die. Like an old dog that still chased squirrels, even though it could barely stand. Cass wasn't one for sentimentality. He had a job to do. But there was something about the message that nagged at him. The urgency, the desperation, almost like the voice on the other end didn't just want their ship fixed. They needed something else. But he wasn't a shrink, and this wasn't a therapy session. This was a repair job. As his shuttle drifted closer to the Alderaan, Cass let out a whistle. The ship was a mess. Its hull looked like it had been to hell and back. Literally. The once glossy chrome was chipped and scuffed. Patches of rust streaked down the sides like faded battle scars. Whatever had happened to it, it had certainly seen better days. Landing gear extended, and with a gentle thud, Cass's shuttle docked with the Alderaan. The hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss, and he stepped onto the ship's airlock, immediately hit by a strange melodic hum. A sound that wasn't quite mechanical, more like it was alive. "Hello!" Cass called out, his voice echoing in the quiet hallway. He clicked his toolkit open, the familiar weight of his wrench comforting in his hand. "I'm here to fix your ship. I hope you didn't expect an engineer who doesn't make terrible jokes." The only response was the hum, vibrating gently beneath his boots. "Okay, we're off to a great start," Cass muttered, rolling his eyes. "I'm talking to a broken spaceship that's not even bothering to respond. You're real chatty for a hunk of metal." He checked his wrist pad. Everything looked fine with the ship's systems, for now. He walked down the corridor, flashlight in hand, scanning for any signs of life, or at least someone who wasn't completely useless at socializing. He rounded a corner and stopped dead in his tracks. Two women stood in front of him, standing so perfectly still that for a moment, Cass wondered if they were holograms. They were tall, taller than he'd expected, and their presence radiated a strange, quiet intensity. Their features were human enough to be comforting at first glance. But as his gaze drifted upward, he noticed something distinctly alien. Their ears. They were long, far longer than any humans, tapering to a fine point. They twitched slightly as Cass took in their appearance. Hi?" Cass said, awkwardly holding up a hand, as if that might help explain the situation. His voice felt too loud in the silent ship. They didn't say anything for a long moment, just staring at him with eyes that were far too calm, too steady. They both had the same calm demeanor, the same silvery blue hair that cascaded down their backs like waves. It was impossible to tell them apart, even with the tiny differences in their facial expressions. They wore matching outfits that shimmered as though woven from light itself. There was no way it was fabric, yet it moved with fluidity as if alive. After a beat, the one on the left smiled. It wasn't wide, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a smile nonetheless, and there was something about it that made Cass's stomach do an uncomfortable little flip. "Engineer Brenner?" The woman on the left spoke, her voice a melody that seemed to vibrate just beyond what he could fully comprehend. It made him think of wind chimes in a warm breeze, gentle and eerie at once. "We are Leary and Vexa. You have come to help us." Cass blinked. "Right, so you've been having ship trouble?" The other woman, Vexa, stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his face. "Yes, the ship has been ill," she said, as if it were a normal thing for ships to get sick. Leary's lips twitched upward again, though the smile didn't reach her eyes. "We have been waiting for someone to fix it. We are glad you came." Cass blinked again, this time a little more slowly. Wait, you've been waiting? For me? You didn't, think to get some help earlier? I mean, it's just an engine and a couple of busted circuits, right? Vexa tilted her head slightly, her long ears flicking in unison. Your arrival was destined, she said cryptically, the word hanging in the air like a puzzle he hadn't quite solved yet. Destined? Cass repeated, raising an eyebrow. I'm just a guy with a wrench. I fix things. I'm not here for destiny or whatever this is. The twins exchanged a quick, unreadable glance. Then, without missing a beat, Leary asked, Do you find it strange to be here? Yeah, pretty much, Cass replied, rubbing the back of his neck. I've fixed ships on the edge of dying star systems, but never one with, a pair of destined twin alien sisters. Vex's lips curled into a smile. You are funny, she said, her voice like liquid silver. Tell us more jokes. Cass chuckled. Oh, I've got jokes, but you might regret asking for them. He winked at them both. How about this one? What do you call an alien who fixes spaceships? A Riparian. Leary blinked, clearly processing. Riparian, she repeated slowly, almost reverently. We will remember that. And just like that, the tension broke, at least for a moment. Cass grinned, feeling a little less like a guy stuck in an impossible situation. The silence that followed felt lighter, more natural. As if these two, odd as they were, weren't that different from the strange human creatures who occasionally ended up stranded in space, telling bad jokes to fill the void. But deep down, Cass had a nagging feeling. This wasn't just about fixing a ship. Not anymore. He adjusted his tool belt and gestured toward the open hatchway behind him. All right, let's get this ship in working order. But I'll warn you, if I fix this thing too quickly, I might just leave. He said it lightly, but the weight of the words hung in the air between them, unspoken yet understood. Vex's eyes narrowed slightly. Will you stay? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Leary, in perfect sync, added, Forever. Cass froze. The Alderaan was a riddle wrapped in a hull of antique elegance and barely suppressed weirdness. Cass found himself in what could only be described as the ship's central artery. Walls that pulsed faintly with a glow like embers under ash. Floors that adjusted subtly to his weight, and panels that shimmered like oil slicks when touched. It didn't just look advanced, it felt conscious. Like the ship wasn't just observing him, it was judging him, and possibly laughing. You sure this thing isn't sentient? Cass asked, peering up at an overhead conduit that drooped suspiciously when he passed beneath it. It's not technically sentient, Leary said from behind him, her voice floating like mist. But she listens. She? The ship, Vexa clarified, gliding forward with the same surreal grace she and her sister seemed to share. She is called Siluria. It means that which shelters starlight in our tongue. Cass paused, wrench in hand. Well, Siluria just dropped a coolant line on my head, he muttered. So either she's sheltering starlight or she's got a personal grudge against engineers. Leary chuckled, an actual melodic laugh that seemed to echo longer than it should. Perhaps she likes to tease. Cass grunted, wiping a smear of glowing coolant off his jacket. Oh, good. I've always wanted to be flirted with by a spaceship. The room they'd entered resembled a fusion of a greenhouse and a server room. Bioluminescent vines wrapped gently around exposed circuitry, pulsing in time with what Cass assumed was the ship's core rhythm. Humming plants exhaled faint clouds of cool mist into the air. The smell reminded him of wet stone, ozone, and oddly grilled cheese. It was oddly comforting. Okay, this is new, Cass said, crouching beside an exposed terminal with a root system growing directly out of it. Do I need pruning shears or a firewall override? Both, Vexa said earnestly. Cass blinked. That was a joke, right? Was it? She replied, tilting her head. Her ears twitched. He sighed and powered up the diagnostic interface on his wrist pad, trying to ignore the tiny vine slowly creeping toward his ankle. No offense, but your ship is kind of a drama queen. Half the systems are disabled manually, and there's no sign of any real damage. It's like she wanted to look sick, but isn't actually injured. Leary and Vexa exchanged that same quiet look again. It was less like they were sharing a secret and more like they were sinking, like twin processors cross-referencing thoughts in real time. Cass leaned against the terminal, arms crossed. All right, spill. This isn't just a pit stop with a busted drive. What's going on? Leary stepped closer, her voice soft. We needed help, so we made sure someone would come. So you sabotaged your own ship? Not sabotage, Vexa said. Just a few gentle malfunctions. Enough to lure a repair vessel. We sent the signal out on the old relay bands. Only a few ships still monitor those. And I'm guessing mine was the only one bored enough to pick it up, Cass muttered, rubbing his face. You kidnapped me with broken lights and guilt. Leary placed a hand over her heart. We would never force anyone to stay. Vexa smiled. We were hoping you might choose to. Cass stared at them, trying to find the line where this entire situation stopped being insane. He couldn't. He decided to move on. All right, fine. I'm already here, and I've got a policy about finishing what I start. But if I'm going to fix your diva of a ship, I'll need access to the fusion manifolds, the nav core, and whatever part of this overgrown garden controls the artificial gravity. Because I'm pretty sure the floor just wobbled when you winked. That was me, Leary said with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. Not the floor. Even better, Cass mumbled, turning back to the terminal. For the next hour, he worked with increasing confusion and reluctant admiration. The systems responded to thought as much as to touch. Instead of wires and relays, there were strands of crystal wrapped in something resembling translucent muscle fiber. It was technology grown rather than built, beautiful in the way a spider's web is, delicate, complex, and potentially full of death. All the while, the twins stayed close. Too close, maybe. They watched his movements like students, or like cats deciding if the warm laptop would make a good bed. They asked questions that had nothing to do with engineering. Do you miss your world? Leary asked at one point. What's your favorite color of dusk? Vexa added. Have you ever danced in Nullgrav? I usually avoid dancing unless the fire alarms are going off, Cass replied, adjusting a crystalline cable. But thanks for asking. I think you would enjoy it, Vexa said, voice like velvet fog. And I think I'd break something, he countered, like my pride, or a hip. They laughed again, their amusement a strange harmony that lingered longer than sound should in this part of space. Eventually, Cass stood and wiped his hands, smearing some kind of iridescent residue across his pants. All right, I've stabilized your fusion core, reset your nav grid, and pacified what I'm pretty sure was a mildly annoyed cyber-organic moss colony. You're no longer at risk of spiraling into a rogue moon. Congrats. You are very competent, Leary said, as if it was the highest form of praise she knew. Thanks, Cass said. Competence is my third best trait. Vexa raised an eyebrow. What are the first two? My good looks and my ability to make extremely bad decisions under pressure. The twins exchanged a look that was just a little too long. Then Vexa smiled again, slow and deliberate. Then you are exactly what we hoped for. Cass froze, a chill crawling up the back of his neck. Not fear, more like the sensation of a gravity field realigning. That's not cryptic at all. Would you like dinner? Leary asked suddenly, changing the subject with the speed of a faulty teleporter. We've prepared something. Cass hesitated. His wrist pad buzzed quietly. Data upload complete. He could technically leave now, but instead he said, Is it edible? It sings slightly, but only when nervous, Vexa said, already turning down a corridor lit with violet bioluminescence. Cass sighed. All right, but if it bites me back, I'm charging extra. They disappeared around the curve of the hallway, long ears swaying gently with each step, and Cass followed, not sure why he was smiling. Dinner aboard the Alderaan was served in what could only be described as a cathedral of light. Cass had expected a cramped mess hall filled with freeze-dried regrets and suspicious protein paste, but instead he found himself standing beneath a vast domed chamber where the ceiling shifted like a sky made of liquid quartz. Bioluminescent trees, yes, trees, arched upward in graceful spirals, their roots disappearing into panels that pulsed with pale electricity. Thin lines of data flowed visibly through the air, like veins of starlight, charting paths between plants, machinery, and something that might have once been a chandelier, but now resembled a jellyfish mid-philosophical breakdown. I feel underdressed, Cass muttered, adjusting the collar of his grease-smudged jumpsuit. Should have brought my tuxedo, or a cape, or at least pants that didn't smell like ionized coolant. Leary smiled as she gestured toward a low, hovering table set with a variety of dishes that ranged from vaguely familiar to deeply unsettling. We replicated your dietary requirements. Cass eyed one of the plates, a steaming pile of something purple, gently jiggling. Did my dietary requirements say may attempt escape during digestion? That one is traditional on our moon, Vexa said, settling gracefully across from him. It is called Thravi. It adapts to your preferences mid-meal. That's comforting. Cass poked it with a fork. It hummed. And terrifying. The twins ate with the poised efficiency of people trained to savor meals as both sustenance and ceremony. Cass, meanwhile, chewed cautiously, grateful that the bread-like substance didn't attempt to bond with his teeth. Conversation drifted lightly. Where he was from, how he became a mechanic, why he still chose to do jobs solo when he could have joined a larger fleet. I like quiet, he said, sipping a drink that tasted like lime soda crossed with a memory of thunderstorms. And people ask too many questions, Leary tilted her head. But we ask questions. You're different. Cass scratched his chin, then grinned. You ask weird questions, like do I dream in gravity wells? Or have I ever heard the stars apologize? It's hard to get mad at that. Vexa looked pleased. The stars do apologize. You just need to know when to listen. Cass raised his glass. Well, I'll be sure to scold them next time I hit an asteroid belt. Leary leaned forward, her long ears twitching with a subtle motion that always made Cass think of antennae tuned to a signal he couldn't quite receive. You are comfortable here? Cass hesitated. The truth was, yes, he was. And that was deeply weird. He'd been in countless vessels across the fringe, most of them barely held together with duct tape and spite, filled with passengers who either hated him or tried to get him drunk. But this ship, its walls softly breathing, its systems responding to his presence like an old friend, felt strangely like a home he'd forgotten he had. I don't get it, he finally admitted. Your ship, it's old, alive, confusing as hell, and borderline flirty. And you two, I mean, you're nice, but you also engineered a fake emergency to lure me in. That's a little theatrical. We didn't lie, Vexa said. Siluria did need repair. Just not urgently. We hoped someone would come, Leary added. And when your signal pinged back, we knew. It had to be you. Cass blinked. You keep saying stuff like that. Had to be me. Why? I'm just a guy with a toolbox and an above-average tolerance for shipboard hallucinations. The twins exchanged a look, the kind that made Cass feel like he was about to receive either a profound revelation or a sudden medical diagnosis. We have seen the weave, Vexa said. The what now? The weave, Leary echoed. It is a kind of echo, a pattern that flows through probability. Not fixed, but suggested. Some beings are sensitive to it. We are. So is Siluria. Cass pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay, now it's sounding like I've been recruited by space witches. Vexa smiled faintly. If you prefer that term. I was joking. We weren't. Cass groaned and leaned back in his chair, or at least the levitating moss pillow that felt like a chair. All right, let me see if I've got this straight. You planted a signal because some space destiny whispernet told you I was fated to repair your ship and stay forever? Leary nodded serenely. Yes, just making sure I didn't miss a memo. They sat in companionable silence after that. The food continued to hum softly. The ceiling overhead transitioned into a false night sky, dotted with slowly moving constellations Cass didn't recognize. Each star leaving behind a faint, fading trail like a memory refusing to die. Eventually, Cass rose and dusted off his hands. Well, I think I'll go check on Siluria's drive core. Make sure she's not about to launch herself into a nebula in protest. You don't have to work tonight, Vexa said. The ship is resting. Yeah, well, he said, pausing at the edge of the chamber. I don't sleep great on strange ships. Gives me weird dreams. Like I'm being watched by creatures with glow eyes and excellent hair. Leary tilted her head. You think our hair is excellent? I mean, objectively, yeah. It's like you both walked out of a high-budget space opera. They both looked pleased. Cass turned, shaking his head, and headed for the corridor. But just before it curved out of sight, he heard them whisper behind him. Soft, synchronous. He is not what we expected, but he is what we need. Cass kept walking, but he couldn't shake the way their words seemed to follow him, trailing behind like vapor. The deeper he went into the ship, the more the corridors seemed to respond, opening faster, lights blooming ahead of him, like he was a returning pilot rather than a visitor. At the core chamber, Siluria thrummed beneath his feet. Her systems purred like a cat just waiting for a lap. Cass touched the console and sighed. He had a bad feeling that fixing this ship was going to be the easy part. Cass dreamed of jellyfish. Not the regular kind you dodged at beach worlds or in aquarium domes, but the kind with eyes, lots of eyes, and little bow ties that looked oddly judgmental. They floated through a nebula of mint-scented vapor, debating whether he'd installed a flux shunt backward or not. One of them kept tapping on a clipboard with a tentacle. It had very strong HR energy. He woke up to soft music. Not human music, no drums, no vocals, no real melody. It was more like wind learning how to sing in an alien cathedral. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't in his ship bunk. He was in a softly lit alcove with walls that shimmered like pearl, and a bed that seemed to grow from the floor, shaped perfectly to his spine. He sat up, blinking. His boots had been cleaned. His jacket had been pressed. Someone, some ship, had even fixed the frayed collar he'd meant to patch since the asteroid job on Belharan 3. Siluria, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. You're dangerously close to becoming my mom. The ship hummed warmly in response, which somehow made it worse. The door irised open without a sound, revealing Leary standing there, hands clasped, ears twitching slightly as if in anticipation. You're awake. Either that or I died and got sent to a very confusing version of paradise. Cass swung his legs off the bed. Tell me you didn't watch me sleep, please. I only checked once, Leary said earnestly. You were making strange noises and smiling. Great, Cass mumbled. Caught mid-dream about bureaucratic cephalopods. I'll never live that down. She turned and led him through the ship's interior, which had subtly changed again. The walls now bore what looked like carvings, elegant, curling glyphs that shifted colors in time with their footsteps. Siluria adjusts herself to moods and cycles. She felt your restlessness and reshaped the hallways to offer a more grounded path. Yeah, well, she can keep her architecture therapy to herself. I'm already emotionally compromised. I haven't had coffee. We replicated something close, Leary said, producing a small steaming cup from a nearby recess in the wall. It's derived from the flowering orbits of the ophalin tree, contains stimulants, a mild euphoric, and memories of sunlight. Cass sniffed it. It smells like if cinnamon married a black hole and they had a weirdly optimistic baby, then you'll like it. He took a sip. It was hot, sweet, bitter, and made the tips of his toes tingle. He didn't trust it. He drank more anyway. Where's your sister? He asked, handing back the empty cup. Recalibrating the star veil, Leary replied. It's the defensive field that projects inert celestial mass to confuse sensors. We use it to remain hidden while traveling near hostile systems. Cass blinked. You're telling me your ship has a literal cosmic invisibility cloak? Leary nodded. Yes, it also makes good soup. I'm not sure if that's a threat or a promise. They arrived at the forward observation deck, a dome of transparent alloy that offered an unfiltered view of the starfield. Cass slowed to a stop, momentarily struck dumb by the display. Ahead, a dying star painted the darkness in furious orange and deep gold, its corona shedding tendrils of light like hair in zero-G. Around it orbited the scattered remains of a shattered moon, massive chunks of glittering ice and dust spiraling lazily, caught forever in its last waltz. I keep forgetting space can be pretty when it's not trying to kill me, Cass said. Vexa stood nearby, fingers outstretched toward the glass, as though she could touch the light. This star has no name in your maps, but on our charts, it is known as the Laughing End. That sounds cheerful. It is where endings and beginnings often meet, she said. Cass raised an eyebrow. I'm sensing a vibe today. Vexa turned to him, her smile faint but real. We want to show you something. Okay, but if this ends with me inside a summoning circle made of cosmic gravel, I'm going to be annoyed. Leary and Vexa exchanged a look. Then the lights dimmed, and a section of the floor lowered into a smooth pool of glowing silver. Holographic projections emerged, slow, sweeping images of the Alderaan at different times, in different shapes. First as a sleek, dagger-like vessel, then a wider winged craft, then something more organic, almost shell-like. She's changed forms? Cass asked, walking around the display. Siluria is very old, Leary said. She was grown during the last years of our people's prime. She is the last ship of the Sorial Bloom fleet, the only one left. Vexa stepped forward, eyes gleaming. Our people are scattered now, lost to time, to war, to forgetting. We are not soldiers. We are preservers. Siluria remembers what others wish to erase. And you needed me, Cass said slowly, to keep her alive. To remind her why she should be, Leary said. Cass ran a hand through his hair. That's a lot of pressure to put on a guy who still counts with his fingers sometimes. You are more than you believe, Vexa said. Cass stared at the hologram. You're really not going to let me go, are you? There was silence. Then Leary said, You can go. But if you stayed, Vexa added, you would not be alone. You would have us. You would have purpose. Cass didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he looked back at the dying star, now blinking like an old eye half shut with sleep. His reflection hovered in the glass, worn jumpsuit, coffee stain, a few new scars. Behind him, the twins stood not as captors or hosts, but like orbiting bodies drawn to the same strange gravity. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but the silence between his thoughts wasn't lonely anymore, and that scared him more than any broken ship ever could. Cass stood in front of the observation window, staring out at the starry expanse. The light from the distant sun, still visible in its dying moments, cast an eerie glow across his face. It was as if the universe was trying to offer him something, and yet he couldn't bring himself to take it. He didn't know how to explain the unease bubbling in his stomach. The Alderaan wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a living thing, and not the kind that waited for a crew to captain it, but one that seemed to actively choose who it wanted on board. Still staring into space? Vex's voice cut through his thoughts, soft as ever, like the sound of the ship's hum. Not sure what else I'm supposed to do, Cass muttered, rubbing his temples. You two keep saying I'm needed here, but no one's really explaining why. What's in it for me? I fix your ship, I hang around, and then what? Is there some cosmic destiny I'm supposed to fulfill? Or is this just another weird job that I'll regret once I'm too far in? Vexa leaned against the doorframe, her ears flicking as she observed him. Is that what you fear? Regret? Cass exhaled slowly. Regret, fear, commitment, all of the above. There was a quiet pause before she replied. Regret is something that eats at you long after it's too late. But fear is a reminder that you still have choices to make. Cass turned toward her, his expression weary. And how am I supposed to know if I'm making the right choice? Because everything here feels like one long, slow burn towards something I don't even understand. The choices you make don't have to be right, Cass. They just have to be yours. Her tone was calm, like she was speaking more to herself than to him. And sometimes what you need isn't clear until after you've taken the first step. Great, so I'm following my feet down a path of cosmic ambiguity. Just what I wanted. Better than standing still, she said with a quiet smile. Don't you think? Cass snorted. I guess. He paused, then added, Still doesn't explain why I'm the one fixing your ship. We need you, Vexa said simply. The Alderaan was never meant to be a lonely vessel. She's a relic of a time long gone, when our people, our families, traveled together. She's incomplete now, just as we are. Cass turned back to the window, his gaze drawn again to the glittering expanse beyond. The stars were like tiny wounds in the fabric of space, each one a reminder of something lost. I didn't sign up for family therapy, he muttered. You didn't have to. Vex's voice was closer now, and he turned to see her standing beside him, her pale eyes glimmering with an unreadable emotion. But sometimes the people who can heal are the ones who don't know they're broken. You're more than just a mechanic, Cass. You're a bridge. Great, he deadpanned. A bridge. As if this place wasn't already weird enough. Vexa didn't smile, but the subtle shift in her posture suggested that she'd said all she needed to. She turned and walked toward the far side of the observation room, her graceful movements casting shadows in the soft light. Leary appeared just as silently, slipping into the space beside Cass, her presence somehow calming. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft and steady, "about what you said, about not understanding why you're here." Cass glanced at her. "You mean the part where I asked if I'd signed up for some weird cosmic reality show?" Leary chuckled lightly, her smile like a quiet ripple on water. "Perhaps, but no. We didn't choose you because you had a toolbox or because you were just passing by. You're here because you're in between. You understand how things break, but you also know how to make them whole again. Not just machines, people." Cass raised an eyebrow. "You two are starting to sound like bad self-help books." "Self-help books don't repair ships," Leary said with a wink, "and they definitely don't navigate between galaxies." Cass let out a reluctant laugh. "Fair point. Still doesn't mean I'm not worried about signing up for a lifetime of cosmic oddities." "You're not signing up for a lifetime," Leary said, her voice dropping a little. "You're living it. We're not asking you to stay forever, Cass. We're asking you to be here for now, for this moment, to help us heal what's broken." Cass stared at her, the weight of her words hanging in the air. He wanted to brush it off, wanted to remind them that he wasn't a knight in shining armor, that he was just a guy with a wrench and a bad sense of humor. But something about the way they spoke, so calmly, so matter-of-factly, made him wonder. "All right, enough with the philosophy," Cass said, shaking his head. "What do you need me to fix next? The ship's mysterious power core? The part that makes the star field look like a live-action painting? Or something even weirder?" Leary's smile widened, and she gestured toward the corridor. "Come, there is something you should see." Cass followed her, his mind still churning with thoughts that didn't quite fit together. He wasn't sure what he expected, but when they reached the rear of the ship, he saw the answer in the form of a massive spherical chamber, its walls a kaleidoscope of shifting patterns, like the pulse of the ship itself. "This," Leary said, her voice quiet, "is the heart of the Alderaan. It is where she speaks to us, where she remembers." Cass raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing this isn't just a giant glowing disco ball?" Leary chuckled. "Number. It's where we communicate with the ship on a deeper level. The patterns you see are her way of expressing thoughts and emotions, things she can't say aloud." Cass stared at the patterns, now flickering with more intensity. Each shift seemed to carry a message he couldn't quite decipher, like a dream slipping through his fingers. "So this is where you talk to the ship, huh?" "Yes," she replied, her voice growing solemn. "This is where Siluria remembers, and where she shares her pain, but she can't do it alone anymore." Cass felt something heavy settle in his chest. "And I'm the guy you think can help with that?" "We believe you can," Leary said softly. "Not because you're a hero or anything like that, but because you've seen what it's like to be alone in a universe that doesn't care." For a moment there was only silence. Then Cass, feeling a weight he hadn't expected, chuckled softly. "Great. You've got me. Let's see what I can do before I start developing an attachment to Siluria here." Leary smiled, the quiet sadness in her eyes shifting into something warmer. "You're already here, Cass, and that's the first step." He glanced around the chamber, taking in the swirling, intangible beauty of the ship's pulse. It was almost as if it were alive, and not just alive in the mechanical sense. Alive in the way something could remember, grieve, and long for a future that was slowly slipping away. Cass wasn't sure what the hell was going on anymore, but he was certain of one thing. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, there was no turning back now. The Alderaan was silent, and for once Cass wasn't sure if it was the ship's hum or his own thoughts filling the air. The walls, soft living things, no longer shimmered with uncertainty. Instead, they pulsed with a gentle steadiness, a rhythm that made him feel like he was breathing in sync with the ship itself. He stood in the heart of the vessel once again, looking out at the shifting patterns of light that had come to feel like a part of him. This was the place where the Alderaan spoke, where the echoes of forgotten voices swirled around him, still familiar but now softer, more like a friend than an enigma. He was no longer just the mechanic who'd wandered in out of chance. He was something else, something less alone. "Are you still thinking about leaving?" Leary's voice came from behind him, her tone light, but with an undercurrent of something deeper. Cass turned, finding her standing just beyond the threshold, her long ears tilted forward like they always were when she was listening more than talking. "You can tell?" he said with a half smile, but it was tight, like the joke was more for him than her. "I can feel it," she replied, her eyes warm but knowing. "The ship is still here. You're still here. But I sense your uncertainty." Cass sighed, leaning against the cool surface of the wall. "Yeah, I don't know why I'm still hanging around, honestly. I came here to fix a ship. I didn't sign up to be anyone's counselor. Not to mention, I'm still not sure what this whole thing is about. Being chosen, or whatever you two keep saying." Leary took a few steps closer, her presence a quiet comfort, like a lullaby playing in the background of a bustling city. "You weren't chosen for anything, Cass. You chose this. You chose to stay. And now the ship, Siluria, has chosen to trust you." "You two keep acting like I've been given a choice to make," Cass said, running a hand through his hair. "But when it comes down to it, what am I even doing here? I'm a mechanic. I fix things. I don't heal them. You've already started, haven't you?" Leary's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it that couldn't be ignored. "You've helped Siluria fix herself, piece by piece. You've done it by understanding her in ways no one else could." Cass glanced at her, then at the swirling patterns across the walls. "I don't know if I'm fixing her. She's alive. She talks. She remembers." "She remembers the past," Leary agreed. "But she's learning to move forward now, and so are you." Cass gave a rueful grin. "Look at you two, all philosophical. Next thing I know, you'll tell me I'm the one who gets to decide the fate of the universe." Leary smiled back, the smallest of smiles, but it felt like she understood something he wasn't quite ready to admit. "Maybe not the universe, but you've already decided your place in this corner of it, and that's enough." The words hung between them for a moment, and Cass wasn't sure if they were meant for the ship or for him, or for both. Just then, a chime echoed softly through the hall. A low, familiar sound, almost like a sigh of relief. Cass turned, his heart giving a small jolt. "What was that?" Leary's eyes glimmered with something like pride. "The core systems are stable. Siluria is awake again, in a way she hasn't been in years. She remembers her purpose now." Cass exhaled, letting the tension in his chest slip away. "She's back up to full speed, huh?" "She is," Leary said, the tone in her voice shifting. "But that's not all. We've been repairing something else too." Vexa entered the room then, her steps quiet as always. But there was something different in her manner. She wasn't just the calm observer anymore. There was purpose in her eyes, a quiet energy that hadn't been there before. "We've repaired the systems, the ship's memory," Vexa said. "But we've also repaired our connection. The weave you sensed earlier, Cass, those threads that bound us together, they're stronger now." "Wait," Cass said, his brow furrowing. "Are you telling me that the ship can connect with you too?" Vexa's gaze softened. "Yes. And we're no longer alone, Cass. Not in the way we once were." There was a long pause. Then Leary spoke again, her voice surprisingly playful. "We're a team now, wouldn't you say?" Cass ran a hand over his face. Yeah. A dysfunctional, star-dusted team of intergalactic repair people with weird powers and a really uncomfortable amount of emotional baggage." Leary laughed. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Cass looked at them both, then at the still pulsing heart of the ship, and something inside of him, something he hadn't realized had been knotted up tight for far too long, finally loosened. "I'm not sure I'm cut out for a team. You two seem to have it pretty well handled." "You've already proven otherwise," Vexa said, her tone firm but kind. "You've helped us become whole, and now we're asking you to stay. For this. For what we can be together." Cass took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. He'd been a drifter before, alone without attachment. Every job had been a fleeting thing, just another problem to solve, another job to finish. But now here, in this ship and with these people, this strange living ship that felt, he realized he was no longer just passing through. "Fine," he said after a long moment. "I'll stay. I'll stick around, but only if I get to make the coffee, and if no one else starts speaking in riddles." Leary and Vexa exchanged a look. Then, without warning, they both burst out laughing. It wasn't a laugh of tension or one of sorrow. It was genuine, real. Cass grinned, letting the sound of their laughter settle in his chest like a warm drink. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't such a bad place to be. "I'll hold you to that," Leary said, wiping a tear from her eye. "You'll regret it," Cass replied with a wink before turning back to the window. The stars outside glimmered in their own infinite way, unblinking and steady. And for once, Cass felt like he could look at them without feeling small or lost. He wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Not when there was a ship that could remember and sisters who could listen, and a place, however strange and uncertain, that was beginning to feel like home. The Alderaan hummed softly around him, the sound rising and falling like a quiet promise. And Cass, well, he decided it was about time he kept one too. The end.